me. I have a significant slideshow here with a lot of words on it, and I hope to make this as interesting as possible. So I will not read the slides aloud to everyone, but we'll go through kind of the Georgia Chamber's legislative priorities for this upcoming session, and then also what I anticipate we'll actually kind of be dealing with on a day-to-day basis. Just a little bit of background about me. My name is Nancy Palmer. I am the Government Affairs Director for the Georgia Chamber of Commerce. On our team, we focus on specific issue areas. My issue areas are judiciary policy, mostly having to do with civil policy. Those occasionally we do get into criminal judiciary policy, and then also tax policy. So if you do have questions specifically in those areas, I'm definitely the person to ask. If it comes to something like healthcare, I'll do my best. So just kind of jumping in, every year, the Georgia Chamber goes through our Government Affairs Council and our policy committees, which are internal, to determine what our legislative priorities are going to be for the upcoming session. This is a list of goals and a list of things that we would like to see. Fundamentally, it is not what happens. So I'm hoping to give you guys some perspective on not only what we would like to see, and these do kind of carry over from year to year, but then also a little background on what happened last year and what I anticipate will happen this year, as far as realistically what types of legislation we are likely to see. So jumping in, of course, COVID-19 has highlighted our need for economic resiliency and a certain amount of economic recovery. This, of course, is most easily done as far as the business community is concerned through tax policy. So a couple of things that we want to look at in tax policy. One, we want to continue to ensure that the unemployment insurance trust fund that has been so significantly depleted is not refilled on the backs of employers. Clearly, employers are having a hard enough time as it is. So we want to make sure that that funding continues to come from the rainy day fund, which is what the governor has done so far, and that we protect employers coming out of this pandemic against any kind of increase in unemployment insurance taxes. Also, we want to protect the tax credits that are currently working and potentially make some small tweaks to tax credits that already exist. Last year, the Senate Finance Committee was hostile to tax credits generally, not only to the creation of new tax credits, but in fact, they produced a piece of legislation towards the end of the year that gutted nearly every kind of tax credit, tax break, tax abatement you could think of. Now, those types of pieces of legislation are shots across the bow. They're not kind of really meant to get anywhere. They're meant to scare us, and they certainly were successful in that way. So when it comes to tax policy, we're in a little bit of a strange spot this year. One, we do want to make sure that we've protected current tax policy. Two, we want to protect against any cuts to any of the current tax credits. And three, on the House side, we're going to be dealing with a new Ways and Means chairman. The Ways and Means chairman did not win his election this year, so we'll be dealing with a new Ways and Means chairman, so we have a little bit of uncertainty on the tax front. Moving forward, on this slide, there's one thing that I just want to point out. It's Cyber Safe Harbor. This is a piece of legislation that would provide a baseline safe harbor for businesses that are dealing in people's personal information. If there were to be a hack or some types of information or customer information that was to be released, we want to give businesses the security, particularly with the pandemic and so many more things being done digitally and online, that they won't be held liable except for in instances where it was genuinely their fault. So we will be looking at that legislation again this year. We looked at it last year and it didn't get as far as we would like, but it got further than some thought. So we're excited about that legislation. When it comes to economic development, I think that the state is still very focused on getting out of the pandemic and less focused on looking forward, but we do want to just make sure that we have that eye on the prize of emerging and innovative technology, which may in fact be biotech. as we move forward. When it comes to employment, I would say 30% of the hair on fire moments that we have at the state capitol are direct challenges to current employment law, whether it's mandates for certain types of hiring, mandates for paid family leave, other types of business mandates for small business, large business alike. We also have seen some challenges to the contracting system, 1099 workers versus W-2 workers. These every year as a us to maintain the employment environment that we have currently. And these things do really pop up absolutely every year. And we do our best to kind of hold the line that Georgia is an excellent state for employers as it stands. In energy and natural resources, we've seen some consistent work on potential coal ash issues and also the Sterigenics plants lawsuits. I genuinely don't know how much space we're going to see move legislatively as far as energy and natural resources is concerned. This is a space where we just keep an eye on and again try to hold the status quo. Health and wellness. Again, this is a space that is fraught. Our main concern at the Georgia Chamber is to make sure that the cost of healthcare for employers stays low. Employers are some of the people that spend the most money on healthcare in the country. However, we also have, as you guys do as well, many members that are in the healthcare space. So inside of health and wellness, we do a lot of monitoring and not a lot of active lobbying because we have a lot of interests that are more educated and have a solid grasp on what's going on. I will mention that last year there was legislation dealing with pharmacy benefits managers and legislation dealing with surprise billing. I imagine both of those issues will come up again. If you would like more information about either of those issues, you can definitely reach out to me and I will put you in touch with our healthcare policy people. Legal reform is a space where I spend, this is where I eat lunch. The Georgia Chamber of Commerce in the last 2 to 3 years has really drilled down and focused on dealing with lawsuit reform and lawsuit abuse in the state of Georgia. Our state is favorable to plaintiffs, and we have some runaway verdicts in this state that make it a very challenging environment for business. There are several areas in which we are looking at civil judiciary policy, the most immediate of which is protecting businesses against COVID-related lawsuits. That's, or what we would call exposure lawsuits. That's a top tier issue for us. We were able to get that protection passed last legislative session, but it does sunset next summer, and so we'll need an extension on that legislation. Additionally, inside of that legislation, we protected manufacturers of PPE from products liability lawsuits. So that's something that also we can continue to look at. In a broader sense, looking beyond the pandemic, there are issues in Georgia's Civil Practice Act, which is this is kind of when we get into like the very nerdy, like lawyers talking about lawyering stuff, but there's certain procedures in the way in which civil lawsuits proceed in Georgia that we find to be overly friendly to plaintiffs and not sufficiently fair to the business community. And so those are some things that we want to look at. Senate Bill 415 and Senate Bill 390 of last year dealt with some of these issues, as did Senate Bill 374 and House Bill 1089. Those pieces of legislation dealt with a lot of these issues, and there's kind of too much in there to kind of go into right now. We just want to make sure that procedurally businesses are protected, and then additionally, we might need to look at changing some of the rules around specifically premises liability cases. We see a lot of concerns, not only from the business community, but also from the insurance community that has to insure the business community as we move forward into making some changes in that space to make Georgia more business friendly. I know that we're the #1 state to do business, but we're also on the top 10 list of judicial hellholes, according to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And so we've got a fire under us to see if we can't get some work done in that space. For talent and workforce, we've got a great partnership with some outside organizations looking at how we can build out and sustain a workforce in Georgia that brings Georgia along as we experience increased freight into the state, as we experience increased movement into the state, and hopefully as we see more and more businesses choose to headquarter here. A specific piece of legislation that we'll likely be looking at is hoping that we can have schools provide SAT and ACT access during school hours and free of charge to students. That's a piece of legislation that we looked at last year. I think that we might have a chance to look at it again this year. But it's always, I think, a space for the business community to make sure that we're communicating to the legislature that we are excited and interested in maintaining an education and workforce development that looks beyond the short-term politicians' career and into the long-term business community's needs. Moving on to transportation, nothing about transportation will surprise any members of this committee. What there is to note is that the Freight and Logistics Commission was recreated or reinstated last year. We're excited about the work that's going on there. And as we know, transportation is both an immediate and a long-term issue moving forward. The Georgia Transportation Association, which is an affiliate of the Georgia Chamber, is really leading the charge in this space. But I imagine we will see a significant piece of transportation legislation, if not this year, then next. So those are the legislative priorities as the Georgia Chamber sees them. Again, want to highlight tax policy and judiciary policy as not only my areas of expertise, but what I anticipate us seeing a lot of movement in this particular session. The only thing that I would mention is that this session will also see a special session of redistricting later in the fall. And so that does change some of the political dynamics moving into the 2021 year. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions. And I hope that I didn't talk too fast or give you too much to read.
Absolutely not, Nancy. That was fantastic. Great conversations to know what is coming up or what we think is coming up. We know things have changed a lot this year in thinking we know what's going to happen.
Exactly.
With that being said, in the session chat, I did put a link to the Georgia Chamber's Chamber at the Capitol page, which under that you'll be able to find legislative priorities and other items. So if anyone has any specific questions about what Nancy talked about, you can probably find it there. But I don't see any specific questions coming up or any requests.
I must have done everything perfectly.
I love it. I love it. But if there's anything we can do to help you all get the word out on any issues coming up, you know how to contact me. We are very happy to do that, and we look forward to working with you in the near future. We do have one question from Mallard Holiday on the what do you consider the most harmful to business legislation being proposed?
Genuinely, I think that when we start seeing changes in employment law, those are of extreme concern. So we would be kind of being on offense and fixing some of this judiciary stuff, which I do think is very difficult for Georgia. But I would say as far as proposals are concerned, there are, it seems like a never-ending series of pieces of legislation proposed that would require businesses to do any number of things that we find objectionable. The 1099 W-2 contractor situation last year was a challenge. We've had play on the box legislation, breastfeeding location requirements. So really looking in that space of employment law and requiring employers to do more than we think employers should have to do in the free market, that's really the space where we've got to play whack-a-mole.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Nancy. We appreciate you. And when you're ready to leave the screen, you can press leave on the top right-hand side, and we hope to see you again very soon.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate y'all's time, and we hope to see you at the Capitol this session. Everybody with face masks on 6 feet away, but we'll be there.
Absolutely. See you soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.